What is up, my ninjas? It's Wes at the Humble Libertarian. Today we're talking about the 41st President of the United States, George Herbert Walker Bush, dead at the age of 94. He died as an old man in his warm, comfortable bed, as I'm sure many people in Kuwait and Iraq would have liked to. Sorry, guys. Hope you don't think I'm punching down by saying anything negative about someone who's just died. But I don't think I'm punching down. This was the President of the United States. He literally ruled the world. It's a time-honored American tradition to call out the wrongdoings of our chief executives and heads of state. And I'm not going to let a little detail like the fact that he just died get in the way of honoring the rights that he fought for and defended as a Navy pilot in World War II. The right of free speech, which is for specifically criticizing our country's political leaders. But this is going to be a fair and balanced look at the life of George Herbert Walker Bush. Let's say a few nice things about him first. He is a remarkable man, obviously deadly smart, and talented and capable. He was a Navy pilot in World War II. Pilots are amazing. I mean, the sheer level of performance that they're capable of, physical and mental. I mean, these military pilots are peak human beings. I mean, they are humans that have gone as far as you possibly can in terms of physical and mental prowess. I mean, so a remarkable specimen, no doubt about that. This guy was a true giant among men. And it's kind of weird to think about, you know? It's kind of weird to think about George Bush, George Herbert Walker Bush, or John McCain, who was also a Navy pilot, just up there in a plane, man, just dropping bombs on people. But believe it or not, that's really what they did all those many years ago. They were dropping bombs on people. McCain was in Vietnam. George Herbert Walker Bush is a little older, so he was World War II. But they were these guys would actually get in an airplane, fly it. The amount of stress that these kind of plane maneuvers put a human body through, a lot of people may not really be aware of how. I mean, when you're pulling the kind of G-forces, like, you know, if you were to take a bucket of water, imagine, and swing it around your head sideways. You swing it hard enough, all the water in the bucket is sloshed to the bottom of the bucket by the centrifugal force if you're swinging it around. And so that keeps it, and that force is even stronger than the force of gravity. That's why it doesn't fall out of the bucket even though you have it sideways and you're swinging it in a circle. So like a plane does that to a human body and to the blood in a human body. And sometimes the forces are several times the amount of force that gravity puts on you. So imagine your body feeling like it weighs twice as much as it does, 3 times, 4 times as much as it does. Just imagine it, your body just being squeezed by the force of momentum, by the force of inertia, being squeezed into your seat, squeezed hard, man. I mean, just imagine like 300 pounds just dropped on your body suddenly, and you have to, how uncomfortable that would make you feel, how much pain that would put you in, and you have to like drop bombs while that's happening, or do evasive fighter maneuvers. You have to be thinking in terms of like mechanical engineering terms and mathematical terms and physics and everything. You're doing like math equations in your head to figure out how high or low to drop the plane or whatever while all of this is happening. It's amazing. And also, you're squeezing your butt as hard as you possibly can. This is something else that not a lot of people know about pilots. When you're up flying a plane and you pull some G's, the force of inertia pulling your blood down out of your head can cause you to black out. So these guys are flying these planes and their blood is draining from their brains and into their legs because of all the G-forces they're facing. And the maneuver, they call it a maneuver. I can't remember the name for it, but the maneuver to keep yourself from passing out from a lack of blood in the brain is you squeeze your legs and your butt as hard as you possibly can. You squeeze those legs and butt, and those muscles just force the blood back up into the chest and into the brain enough to keep you awake, to keep fighting a war from a destructive, powerful fighter jet or bomber jet. So just imagine that right now as they're lowering George Herbert Walker Bush to rest. Is just imagine just George Herbert Walker Bush up in a plane somewhere over Chichijima in the Pacific and just squeezing that little future presidential butt as hard as he can so he doesn't pass out while he's dropping bombs on some Japanese. It's pretty funny, man. John McCain did it too. It's remarkable, and it's kind of funny to think about. George Herbert Walker Bush would go on to serve in the United States Congress after starting a successful oil company in Texas. And he eventually became the director of the Central Intelligence Agency for a couple years in the 1970s. He became vice president to Ronald Reagan in 1980, remained vice president throughout those 8 years, and ran for president on Reagan's coattails in 88 and won. What was his legacy as president of the United States? Well, first of all, he ran up the national deficit, the national debt, to unprecedented levels. And as president of the United States, according to the Cato Institute, in a policy analysis piece entitled The Profligate President, a midterm review of George Bush's fiscal policy performance, which was written in 1991, it says that George H.W. Bush was borrowing $1 billion every day that the federal government didn't even have. $1 billion a day to pay for all the extra spending under his administration. And that's after raising taxes $140 billion after promising he wouldn't raise taxes on the campaign trail. So he got elected on a promise that he wouldn't raise taxes. He broke his promise to the American people and raised them a lot. And then that still wasn't enough money for him to steal from the American economy and funnel to whatever he thinks it should go to, instead of letting the people who made that money and earned it decide what to do with it. He still had to borrow $1 billion every day and put us on the hook for that, and promise we'd pay it back with interest, and hog up credit in the meantime, and so make it more expensive for, private businesses engaged in legitimate commerce for profit with willing customers to borrow money. And the Federal Reserve monetizes a lot of that debt. So what do? They create new money and buy that debt. And the result is higher prices, inflation. So basically, it's like he raised taxes on us 4 different ways after promising he wouldn't. And that's not something to gloss over. I mean, that is an incredible dereliction of duty. If you're the President of the United States and you're using it, you're abusing it. You're abusing that power and you're misusing it to take so much from the American people. Of course, the other big aspect, in addition to, the war on drugs, all kinds of nefarious government activity under George Herbert Walker Bush that violated the rights and liberties of so many people. There's the Gulf War in Iraq. And the Bush administration bears a lot of guilt because the government of Saddam Hussein had been a Washington ally throughout the 1980s in its war against Iran. And Ronald Reagan gave Saddam Hussein intelligence and logistical support and even aid packages and weapons to fight against the Iranian government. So Saddam Hussein was a client state of Washington throughout the 1980s. And before he invaded Kuwait, he asked the Bush administration for permission. And this is something that is not widely known, but it's absolutely a matter of record that you can look up and see for yourself is true, that we now have diplomatic cables. WikiLeaks dropped a bunch in 2010. Diplomatic cables between Saddam Hussein and higher-ups in the U.S. State Department during the Bush administration, right before the Gulf War. And, he asked for permission to go to Kuwait and invade it. And our State Department gave him a wink and a nod. Okay? And you don't even need the WikiLeaks cables. It's a matter of public record that we sent a State Department official not even a month before the invasion to meet with Saddam Hussein in person. And you can go on Wikipedia and see the article about it and see the pictures of her shaking hands with him. It's pretty weird, And then he went to war in Kuwait. And then George W. Bush got a coalition of the willing, quote unquote, backed by Saudi Arabia and other Arab countries in the area and Europe, and we all got together and we fought a war, man, that the Washington establishment could have probably just prevented by just telling Hussein don't go to Kuwait. It would have been that easy. I mean, the level of evil we're talking about here is truly difficult to fathom. The level of senselessness, all of the senseless mayhem and death and destruction and loss that resulted from this. And that's just not really something, even if a man dies and his kids are sad that he's gone at this moment, that's just not really something I can overlook.